Hello, my name is Crystal Petry, and you are watching another episode of the Crystal Petry Podcast, Season 4. Money isn't just about dollars and cents, it's about freedom, choices, and peace of mind. Today, I am joined by Isobo Amaso, a certified financial planner who helps people turn financial stress into strategy. From managing cash flow to building wealth for the future, we'll explore why the right advisor can change not just your finances, but your family's future. So, welcome to the podcast, Isobo.
Crystal, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I am so happy that you are here. So, where in the world are you?
So if for all of our video watchers on YouTube and the like, if you can tell by my background, that is actually Signature FD's cafe or entryway into our office. So although that is a virtual background, I am still here in Atlanta, Georgia, where our main office is.
Okay, all right for the GA. Okay, so let's talk about this your professional journey and how you got into basically money is
Yeah.
what we're talking about today. So what is your journey and what led you to become a certified financial planner?
Oh, that's a great question, Crystal. And I think that's a great way to kind of start off this conversation because it really does frame how I do everything when it comes to working with my clients. So I grew up as a kid of a pastor and a missionary. So with that, I was able to see my parents have a calling or vocation, right? So everything they did was for the benefit of other people. And that's something that I long for, something that I really wanted to do, and something that my parents instilled in me as a young child to say, hey, and whatever you do, regardless of what it is, make sure you're doing in servitude to others. And that's really something that grew with me. So at some point, I actually wanted to become a pastor. I wanted to serve the church. I wanted to do all that things and really follow my father's footsteps. And then quickly realized that for one reason or another, one really being a financial backed reason, is I knew that I wasn't going to make it in the clergy field. So I actually went into college with a general finance degree, thinking that, hey, if I got a finance degree, I'd be able to figure it out. I had some internships in finance departments and accounting departments and did different things. And so I was just like, I'll figure it out once I get there. Luckily, I took a class my second semester senior year that was just a financial planning class. I did it for credits. It was one of those things that I wanted to check off the box for me before I graduated. But while I was in there, I really started to learn a lot about the industry. I know we'll talk more about it, but my professor was actually a financial advisor. And she told me two things that really stuck with me, or one big thing that stuck with me and also propelled me into really doing a deep dive into the financial planning industry. And it was, you get to work with two out of the three most important things in people's lives. And that's money or finances and family. So for most people, finances, faith, and family, those three F's are usually the three most important things in different orders in people's lives. And so when she told me that, I was like, wow, it really resonated with me because I had that calling back from my dad talking about you want to be impactful. You want to be able to change people's lives. You want to be able to help people. And when she said that, I was like, that's it. I love being able to work with finances. I love being able to help people with money. I'm big into numbers, but I also have a relationship dynamic that I didn't want to give up, working with Excel all day. And so then I just started doing a deep dive and realized this is somewhere I can really make a career and have a great impact on people.
Now, before we started doing our podcast, Isobo, I had you titled as a certified financial advisor, and you corrected me, and I'm thankful that you did, that you are a certified financial planner.
Mhm.
What is the difference between the two, and what does you are also a wealth advisor?
Yeah.
So, several titles here. What does a wealth advisor do? What does a certified financial planner do? What does a certified advisor do? And I feel like maybe we're splitting hairs here. Are we with the different titles?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, yes. I think there are a lot of people in the industry or a lot of people in the finance world who will use the term financial advisor, financial planner, wealth advisor, wealth manager interchangeably.
Mhm.
But I do think there are some structural differences to some of those terms.
Okay.
So, for me at least, when I think of a financial advisor, I typically think of a traditional, someone who's actually closer to a wealth advisor, someone who's, can work with someone on the budgeting, the cash flow planning, can also work with them on their investments, maybe does some things with tax, maybe helps them with estate. So kind of a comprehensive type of advisor. So for me, that's kind of a wealth advisor, maybe even a financial advisor. I think wealth for me, you get into usually maybe more complex issues, maybe bigger number issues for clients. So maybe a little bit more high net worth than
Mhm.
a traditional financial advisor, I would think, at least for my definition. For financial planner, I think we're like, going back to kind of splitting hairs a little bit. But for me, a financial planner is someone maybe who doesn't really get involved as much with the investments and strictly works with them on a financial planning standpoint. So budgeting, cash flow. Maybe they're an executive and they're helping with stock options, right? Maybe they're a business owner and they're helping them with business plans. So someone who's maybe more traditionally doing planning for a client and maybe not as involved with the investments. And then I think a wealth manager, kind of the last one that people throw around, I think a wealth manager traditionally is someone who may be only involved with the investments. And you're not going to really go to for the financial planning. I'm trying to sell a business. How do I mitigate taxes? Or, this is my estate issue. How can you help me on the estate side? Or I have this cash flow problem. How can you help me with the cash flow problem? That is someone who's not typically going to help in that realm, but maybe just I'm here to do your stocks, I'm here to do your bonds, and I'm maybe going to do some alternatives for you. I'm not going to really dabble in the financial planning side of things. So overarching, that's how I see the delineation. But as you said, I think we may be splitting hairs depending on who you're talking to and how we go about framing those different titles. But yes, I'm a wealth advisor and a certified financial planner. And to kind of circle back to the CFP side of things, that is an actual designation that we get from the CFP board, that a financial advisor can be a CFP, a wealth advisor can be a CFP, a wealth manager can be a CFP. So that's just a designation that people have.
Okay. Because thank you so much for breaking that down. Because this entire time I was thinking a wealth advisor, a wealth planner was someone that strictly dealt with wealthy people. Now,
Mm,
whatever that number is that makes you wealthy, I don't know what that number is, but that's what I thought, that they only dealt with wealthy people that had generational money
yeah,
because of that title, wealth or wealthy.
yeah.
But I see that I have been incorrect this whole time, but I'm sure they deal with a lot of wealthy people as well.
Yeah, I think depending on who you talk to, exactly what you're saying about a wealth or a number starts at a different aspect for different sorts of advisors, right?
Right.
You'll get some advisors who say, "Hey, if you have less than $10 million, don't even look my way." Right?
Hmm.
They're not even considering having that conversation, and you can take it down each ladder. Some start at 5 million, some start at 2 million, and then going back to that financial planner type of title. I think financial planners typically say, "Hey, I'm not even worried about how much assets you have. Do you have a decent income to where it makes sense for us to be engaged? Go into a relationship that way." So they may charge someone hourly in that perspective, or like a subscription model, which is a new thing as well, where they'll say, "I'm going to charge you, $1,000 a month or $500 a month, and it doesn't matter how much assets you have." So that's actually a new thing that's starting to come up as well. So
Okay.
it just depends on the advisor and what their target niche is.
Okay. Understandable. So, as a certified financial planner,
Mhm.
what is a typical day for you with a client? What does that look like?
Yeah, so my days kind of depend on the situation, what's going on. So I typically, first and foremost, I am client first, regardless of everything else going on. If a client wants to pick up the phone and call me and I'm available, I'm answering the call, right? They send me an email and say, hey, do you have time to talk this later this afternoon? I'm finding the time to talk with them. So my first priority is meeting with my clients day to day. I try to do it, thinking about my week to week schedule. Personally, I don't like having meetings on a Monday and a Friday because I'm trying to start my week off right, and I'm trying to end my week off right too. And so typically, if it's my choice, I'm scheduling client meetings anywhere from Tuesday to Thursday, and I want to make sure that I'm able to give them the time allotted. I'll spend an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours with clients depending on the situation, and so that is my first priority in the day. From there, I stay up to date with like market headlines, investment stuff, the latest financial planning things, and just keeping, my ears and down to the ground to make sure I understand what's going on with my clients, things that can be impactful for them, and just keeping up to date with them with whatever financial planning topics they have going on. I'm also growing my practice. So I'm out doing this, doing a lot of marketing, doing a lot of business development, and getting in front of people as well to share my story and share the story of Signature FD.
What would you say is the biggest misconception about wealth advisors? I know for me, is what I stated earlier that, with that title, wealth advisor or wealth management, then you only deal with wealthy people. But what would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions about wealth advisors?
I think the one you mentioned is a great one, and we can talk about that one for a little bit too. You're gonna have to cut me off because I can go down a rabbit hole about the misconceptions in general. But I think the one you mentioned is a good start because I think to some extent, everyone needs some sort of financial planning, regardless of what stage of life you're in. Either if you could be making $10,000 a year or $10 million a year, I think everyone can gain from having financial planning, having financial education, and just having overall financial literacy, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's very important, especially in today's day and age, to understand your wealth from a mental standpoint and also monetarily with what your dollars can do for you. So I think that's a big misconception. Like I said, I have the title wealth advisor, and I know that can scare some people away and not want to have the conversation with me. But it's something that I think I've told you before and other people is that regardless of however many dollars you have or whatever you're making or however assets you have in the door, I'm always willing to have a first conversation with someone just to get a gauge of it and make sense to fit. And so for me, and a lot of people would think it's funny in the industry to say our most common answer is it depends, right? So before a client will ask me something, I'm like, well, it depends, right? And so even when it comes to, hey, the type of clients I work with, it depends on the situation, right? It has to make sense for them. It has to make sense for me. And we want to make sure that when we are, ultimately charging them a fee, that it's in their best interest. Because I am a CFP, which means I'm governed by the SEC and I'm a fiduciary. So I have to do what's in the best interest of my clients at all times, which is something we can talk about as well. But having that designation, having that in the back of my mind, I have to be understanding of where people are when we're making those decisions, understanding if that's a type of client that I want to take on.
And as we're doing this podcast, let me give my disclaimer here that the questions and the answers are general. They're not specific to any one person or family or business. Absolutely. So if you have specific questions about your financial planning, your cash flow, please reach out to a certified financial planner, an advisor to answer those specific questions. This podcast is just for advising only.
Very informational.
Okay. Very informational. Thank you for that. Very informational. So tell me about cash flow planning and why is that needed?
I think cash flow planning is the bare bones of what everyone needs to figure out day one, right? So let's say you get your first job and you're working at Chick-fil-A or McDonald's or whatever it is, and you're trying to buy that bike or save up to buy the car or, save up for college, but maybe you're thinking down the line, you're saying, hey, I need to be able to fund my college. What are you thinking about with each one of those paychecks that are coming in? I'm making $1,000 this paycheck. I'm going to have some that goes to taxes, right? So we're talking bare bones stuff. I make $20 an hour and I work 40 hours a week. I do that math, and hey, you realize when that first paycheck comes that you're not getting all of that money, right? Taxes is very fundamental. The first slap in the face, if you will, of welcome to the real world, welcome to working in everyday life, right? And so when you start to have those conversations at a young age, and you start to add zeros and commas as you get older and wiser, having that foundational understanding of the cash flow, of understanding I have this amount of my paycheck, I have these expenses, I have this for taxes, I have this for savings. It allows you then to grow on those principles, grow on the fundamentals of the cash flow, to where when you get your first job, once you graduate or end trade school or whatever it is, those numbers may become larger, but your principles from what you were doing with your first job stay the same. So as your goals and the numbers get bigger, you still know what you're doing, and you still can apply those rules that you learned at a young age. So it starts for me as soon as you can start learning about finances. I took a general finance class, financial planning class, my high school, my freshman or my senior year of high school, and it was high level credit and high level budgeting, high level savings, and I was like, this is great. I wish I knew this when I had my first job when I was 15. So I don't think it's ever too early to start having that cash flow conversation and thinking through the education of it all.
What are some common mistakes that people make with managing their just everyday, day-to-day money?
I think that big thing, depending on where you are stage in your career, is taxes, right? It's either on the front end of, hey, I didn't think I would have this much taken out for taxes, or on the back end where you said, oh, I don't want this taken out at all, or I'm going to limit how much I have in taxes taken out, and then you owe the government come April. And that's the last place you want to be as well. So it's finding that balance of your withholdings, also not loaning to the government for free, right? You're giving them a free loan when you get a refund in April or later in the year. But it's also saying, hey, I don't also want to owe the government money because I decided to under withhold on taxes. So taxes, I think, is a big one that obviously affects everyone. And then I think another one is paying yourself first by the modes of saving, but thinking about it as an expense, right? So you have a mortgage, you have rent, you have car note, you have groceries, you have all these line items that are expenses. For me, I try to tell all my clients who are working through cash flow is your savings to your 401k or your savings to your emergency fund or your savings to your IRA. That's just another line item as an expense.
Yes.
And that helps you think about it and say, hey, it's an expense, but I'm paying myself. Because once you kind of think about it as a separate thing, a separate bucket, then it's like, okay, whatever I have left over, maybe that's what I'll save. And then that's how it's hard to build the right patterns and the right goals to set when you're trying to save for a big trip or for the house or for the car, because you're thinking about it differently than you would think about another line item as an expense, which is, I think, is a good way to go about it.
How do you coach people, if I could use that word, coach people with spending now versus saving for later? Because I feel like a lot of people now in the generation that we're in, they're just spend now. I want to see the fruits of my labor now and not really think about 10, 20, 30 years down the line.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways I try to have that conversation. And it's a tough conversation to have, especially depending on where you are in your career. You just started out, you graduated, you took on student loans, whatever it is, and now you're like, I'm finally making the big boy, big girl job. Like I wanna really be able to spend this money. Like I want to be able to live on this money because I've worked hard to get to this position. I am 100% for that. I'm never gonna be the advisor to say, hey, you can't spend your money this way. Don't buy that thing. I'm just gonna be the advisor who tells you, hey, here's the other side of what can happen if you decide to buy that $100,000 car versus the $50,000 car, right? Or take 4 trips versus 2 trips. I just try to play the other side and let them know these are the trade-offs. That's really what it comes down to. It's a trade-off. And so part of what I'll do, depending on the range or how long we're talking about, is I'll build out something like a plan or a chart that shows compounding interest, right? And that's something that people can Google out on their own free time. If you said, hey, I wanted to spend an extra $100 for going out or going to eat or going on this extra trip, whatever the dollar is, you can pull up a compounding calculator on Google and say, if I made that $50 versus $100 and I saved the other $50, what could that $50 look like over a year, over 2 years, over 5 years, over 10 years, if I just invested that money versus spending all of that same amount? So I think that's a good way to kind of start to have that conversation, is the pros of compounding interest, which is great. Okay. And another way I think about it is still having that conversation of paying yourself. So let's say you want to take that $100 trip, or you want to buy, go out an additional $100 or whatever it is. If you say, I'm going to spend an additional $100 for this trip or this ticket item, what if I paid myself 50% of that? So for every $100 I want to go out with, I'm going to save $50.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Right. Make it a game with yourself, right? Make it a goal to say, okay, it's $200. I'm going to save $100 now. Right. And then you kind of manipulate it, right? You gamify the situation, you gamify savings. But then 2, you're also like, oh, now that $100 just turned into $150. That $200 turned into $300. Is that something that's really worth it?
And what ends up happening, at least for me, you start seeing that money pile up. You don't want to spend it after that. You don't want to go to the fancy restaurant or buy the latest cell phone or whatever. You just want to continue to watch it build.
All it takes is to see one statement of, oh, wow, I made $50 in interest, or I made $50 in gains, and I didn't have to do anything, right? I didn't have to work that extra hour. You compute it to, if you're an hourly worker, or break your salary down into hourly. And you say, hey, I made an extra $50 an hour as if I was working, but I didn't have to give you my time, my labor, my emotions.
Passive income.
Right? The passive income aspect of it, once you start to see it build and compound, it's moving. It really is.
Mm-hmm. How do you get people to trust you? Because as we stated at the beginning of the conversation, you're dealing with at least 2 of the major F's in people's lives. So that's family and finance, major components. So how do you get people to trust you with those things?
If I had the crystal ball and I had the answer to that, I would be in a much better place. It's tough. It's a tough question and a tough answer, because that is something that I'm asking myself every day.
Okay.
And I think it depends on the person. I think most times it's time. Most times it's saying, hey, I met you a year ago and I kept in contact and we've been meeting and I've been telling you about who I am and we've gotten to know each other on a personal level. And I talk to you about the type of things that I'm doing for my clients. And, I make it to a way where it resonates with you, right? It's something that you're going through, or a situation that may happen to you, or something that you may have already gone through. Another big thing, and something that everyone, I think, in any kind of business it relates to, is the referral side of things. Mm-hmm. So if I'm I work a lot with attorneys, specifically estate attorneys, right? Because everyone, regardless, another plug, it's informational, but not financial advice. Everyone needs wills, healthcare directives, and estate plan. Mm-hmm. And so that's typically the first thing I'm looking at with clients when they come to the door, is especially when they have young kids, right? You have a will in order, you have guardianship in order. What does your potential life insurance look like? All that's in order. And so I work a lot with estate attorneys to help clients get that situated. And so building great relationships with partners, with other advisors that you work with, is crucial because they're the ones who are also being in the door and being with the clients. And when they're saying, oh, I need a financial advisor, I'm going to go to the attorney I trust. You want that attorney to be trusting you, so they're making that referral for you as well. So it's really about building connections in general, showing people that you're doing great work, and staying consistent with communication. I think that's the best way to do it.
How do you help people set financial goals? Do they come in already having like a goal in mind or a plan in mind, or do you casually plant the seed of what they need to do?
Most times when prospects or clients come to me, there's a problem and they're trying to solve that problem. So then once we're able to strip back and get to the foundation of what's going on, we're able to basically, we can pluck out the goals very easily, right? But the thing then is that when we're able to dive deeper, we can get to the root of the problem, the root of the situation. And typically the problem that they have, that they come in with, is not the fundamental issue that they're trying to solve.
Okay.
And so I'll take time to do a full-on discovery or exploration meeting. I think a lot of advisors do the same thing. And I'll have a list of questions based on what I know about them, or if we haven't gotten to that point, I have a general list of questions that we'll ask. And that's when we start to really uncover what is going on and why they're meeting with me. Because most people aren't just going to pick up the phone one day and say, oh, I need a financial advisor. Let me just call. Nothing's going on. I'm just going to call a financial advisor and, because I need one. There's usually something that's going on, and it's usually more than one thing. And so we're helping them tackle that. And at the same time, we're thinking about all the other things that they need help with. And that's where I think having a comprehensive advisor, if it's a financial advisor, wealth advisor, CFP, whatever the title you want to use, make sure that that person is comprehensive. It isn't only going to offer you one sort of solution, right? They have multiple solutions. They're able to look at things through different lenses, and they know and can meet you where you are at the end of the day.
Talk to us about diversifying income. At least I hear it a lot, TV, anything financial, they're talking about diversify your income, diversify your portfolio. Explain to me exactly what that is. And is there a benefit to diversifying your portfolio and diversifying your income?
Yeah. So thinking about diversifying your portfolio, I think that's a bit different than, diversifying income, which I think both of those kind of get to be just jargon and buzzwords that people are throwing around on the internet just to get clicks for the most part. I think when people think of diversifying their income, they're thinking, oh, real estate, which I think is an easy one for people to conceptualize, right? Okay. The idea of I'm going to borrow some money. I've already got my own place. I understand how real estate works. Like I've got to, call my contractor and get, my fridge taken care of, or my AC, HVAC taken care of, whatever it is. But then they're saying, oh, let me go ahead and start this passive income and diversify my income by buying another piece of property and allowing just the cash flow to come in. But as any homeowner knows, there's a lot that goes into taking care of some real estate and a piece of property. It's more than I have a mortgage. I lease it out. My lease is more than my mortgage. I'm making money. We know it's a lot more than that. Right? Yes. You have closing costs. You have the one-offs that are coming up. You have to deal with tenants. You have to deal with locations. You have to deal with the calls in the middle of the night where they say there's a leak or whatever it is. Right? There's a lot of factors that goes into being a homeowner, especially when you want to make it a portfolio or you want to be an investor in the real estate landscape. But that's one thing that I think, and most things people are thinking about when they think of diversifying their income. There are other financial tools that people would think about of, oh, let's do annuities, or let's just do, bonds, or, things that are money market funds, things that offer interest because you have an interest rate assigned to it, and it's going to shoot off X amount of income per month. And so that's how sometimes people think about passive income from their portfolio from a diversification standpoint. The way we think about diversification of a portfolio is having more than just your traditional, I'm going to have 5 stocks and it's going to be everybody I know. It's going to be the Costco's, Apple's, Tesla's of the world. We think about diversifying your portfolio past that through ETFs or baskets of stocks, which allow you to have access to more than just the big names. It allows you to have access to international stocks, or allows you to have access to smaller companies that you may not have heard of, but may still be performing very well. So we definitely believe in diversification of your portfolio. And the more wealth you have, the more complex your situation is, the more opportunities and more things you can leverage from a strategy point to help from a diversification standpoint. So all I have to say is it depends on the situation. It depends on what they're trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish.
What is the importance of debt management when you're trying to build wealth?
Yeah, we'll have a lot of people that come to us and say, I've got X amount in credit card debt, or I have X amount on the mortgage, or I have X amount on the line of credit, or I have X amount in auto loans. I think the first one, the credit card debt, is what's important. Mm-hmm. So we have the conversation of, if you know your interest rate on your credit card, your APR is anywhere from 15 to 20 to 25%. And we think in the market, I'm just generally speaking out loud, you can get you're hoping anywhere from 5 to 10, whatever the case may be. Most times it makes more sense to pay off your credit card debt before you even get to investing.
Okay.
Because that's compounding interest that is a guaranteed rate at that 15, 20%. So if someone comes to us and says, "Oh, I've got a large credit card balance that I've been trying to work off post grad, or I had to take on all this debt while I was in grad school, or med school, or law school," it makes sense. It happens. Mm-hmm. But typically, this advice is not for everyone, but typically, I'm going to tell that person to say, "Hey, we need to focus that excess cash flow on your credit cards." That's where we need to start. Maybe we combine some idea of setting up an emergency fund. If you don't have an emergency fund, that's a different story. Mm-hmm. Maybe we put 50% towards credit cards and 50% towards emergency funds. But if you're trying to tell me, "Oh, I want to invest in this next real estate thing," or "My friend brought me this deal," or I'm thinking about investing in the stock market or the alternatives, and you tell me you've got 25% of your net worth tied up in credit card debt, typically I'm going to advise against that. So that's kind of how I see the idea of having that type of credit card debt. Your mortgages, your auto loans, I think that's a function of having collateral, right? You have a car to back that up. You have a car that you're using. You have a house that you have to live in. That's different debt, in my opinion. I'm typically...
Would that be considered good debt?
I don't know if I like to throw the term good debt. I mean, credit card is bad debt. I can say that and feel good saying that.
Yes.
But saying good debt or bad debt with a mortgage is kind of, I don't know if I want to add those adjectives to that specifically. Because for me, there'll be times where people come to me and they're renting an apartment or they're renting a home, right? They don't own, they don't have a mortgage. And I'll say, that makes sense for you. You don't need to buy a house. You don't need to take on a mortgage. You may have just graduated. You may have just moved to this city. You may not know where you're going to be in the next 3 to 5 years, right? If you don't have a long-term plan of what you're going to be from a physical location standpoint, I'm not going to lead with someone and say, "Hey, you need to buy a house right now." I typically won't lead with having that conversation. I'll get a lot of pushback from that, but that's my personal belief. I don't think owning a house and taking on a mortgage is for everyone, given where they are. I think that conversation, it depends. But typically when you have mortgages, especially when where interest rates were near zero back in the early 2020s, and people refinance their mortgage to 2.25% or 3%, that's quote unquote good debt that I would say, let's not do anything with that. Let's not try to add any extra payments to that. Let's figure out what that looks like. But if you say, I'm so debt or risk averse, and I don't like the idea of having any debt, then we can have a conversation about that. So going back to my typical answer, it depends on your situation and what you're trying to do.
How do financial decisions impact family stability? Exactly. Exactly.
That's a loaded question, Crystal.
It
That's a
is.
big one. Where to start? I When we're having that conversation, right? I led off by saying, and you mentioned the two big F's, and you throw in faith to make it the three big ones. Family, finances.
Mhm.
We have you can throw a rock at a financial advisor and say, hey, tell me the first story of an issue where somebody had falling out because of money. They'll have a story like that. It's it You think you have the greatest relationship with your siblings, with your
Mhm.
parents, with your nephews, with your cousins, until money gets involved and you see somebody through an entirely different light.
Ah,
And so I think it's really important to understand the dynamics of what money does to people, good or bad. It just happens, right? Good or bad, what money does to people, and honestly, bringing in a third party. Sometimes it's a financial advisor, sometimes it's an attorney, sometimes it's like a mediator. You get to the court level, you've got a mediator involved,
oh,
but hopefully you don't get to that point, and
right.
hopefully you can start early. And so part of what we do and part of what we're really intentional about is family generational planning. So when we're working with older clients who have kids, adult kids, clients who have adult kids and maybe even grandkids already, we'll propose the meeting, or we'll propose the idea of saying, let's have a family meeting where you and me and the client will discuss first to say, what are we comfortable with sharing with your kids, right? Sometimes clients don't want their kids to have access or know about anything. Sometimes they're like, I'm an open book. I want them to know everything. It's going to be theirs eventually. It's going to be able to make everything as clear as day. Let's just put it all on the table. And they'll be willing to have those conversations. And we'll get the kids in the room. We'll get all the siblings in the room. If the grandkids are old enough, we'll get the grandkids in the room. And we'll have these conversations about, this is what your parents want. This is what your grandparents want. We will get with the estate attorney to make sure it's fully fleshed out in their estate docs, that everyone is on the same page while they're alive.
Yes.
While they're alive. That's what the important thing is. We don't want to just say, hey, mom and dad had everything in the safe. We never talked about money. We never talked about finances. It was taboo. And some of us growing up in a culture where money is very taboo. It was for me. And so being able to communicate that with your kids, especially when the money is substantial, when the dollars are substantial and the kids have no idea about it, the more kids you have, the harder it is to mitigate those situations.
Yes.
So if you can have those conversations while you're alive, while everyone is in the same room, and hopefully while you have a third party there who's documenting, who understands, and who has your best wishes in mind, it makes those money and family dynamics that much easier.
And that leads me directly into my next question. What are some specific money conversations that need to be had? Like, what specifically do families need to talk about when it comes to money?
Mm-hmm. A big one that we'll come across that we're like, we need to have a conversation immediately is when we're reviewing estate docs and we'll notice, typically you have two kids, everything goes to the kids 50-50, or, per stirpies, right? Everything goes to the kids evenly. The issue, and sometimes we'll see, not issue, just how it happens, is that maybe there's one of their children who needs a little extra help for whatever reason. That kid needs a little extra help, and there'll be a specific bequest to that kid to say, hey, we're going to leave the house to this one particular child, right? They're kind of living there already, and we want them to stay comfortable. We want them to have that house, or we're going to carve out, before we give everything per stirpies or evenly, we're going to carve out $100,000 for this specific child, whatever the number is, 100,000, 10,000, whatever the number is. And we'll go back and we'll say, one, bring it to their attention and say, hey, because most people, they'll look at their estate docs once every 10 years, if that. Mm-hmm. And so you'll go from having 8-year-old children to 18-year-olds to 28-year-olds, and life happens, things change.
Yes.
So we want to go over to say, this is what's currently in place if something were to happen to you today. Is this what you want? A lot of the times, if they're on it, they're like, yeah, we looked at that a couple of years ago. Everything's still good. If they haven't, they're like, whoa, we need to talk about this. So that's our first step. Let's make sure we're all on the same page about what's going on here. Okay. And then if there's a specific bequest to a child or to a grandchild or to a niece or a nephew, whatever that looks like, let's talk about that specifically. Do you still want that in place? Yes. Okay. Why? Not because we say you can't do it or we have any judgment. Okay. Do all the parties, do all the other beneficiaries understand this? And sometimes like, oh no, we haven't talked about it. We haven't found the right time. We'll push it off. It's okay. It's fine. We'll get there eventually. Life happens.
And it happens fast.
So when you have specific interests or gifts that you're giving to one child and not the other, one cousin, not the other, that can build something very poorly that can happen in a dynamic in a relationship. And so we're really big into communicating those things, having those conversations, making sure that the executors, they know, the grantors know what's going on with their estate, making sure that I recommend everyone review their estate docs every 3 to 5 years, regardless of what's going on. But if you have a major change in your life, you have a child, if unfortunately someone passes away or someone becomes, someone graduates college or becomes 18, those are all good points to start to review your estate docs again to make sure your plan is where it needs to be. Your youngest child graduates. Sometimes you have a plan in place to where, your kids are spread out. Your kids may be 10 years apart, oldest to youngest, and you have a full adult one at some point, and you have a 15-year-old or one who's trying to make it through high school at another point. And you want to make sure that they're able to get through high school, they're able to get to college. And maybe the way you fund and support them is different than how you would fund and support a 30-year-old, right? So making sure you understand that and you're communicating that with your beneficiaries. So it all comes back to communication. It all comes back to making sure you have a good hold on what's going on with your documents in your estate.
Now, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the conversation about helping clients plan for the now and plan for the later. How do you help clients plan for retirement? How do you figure out how much money you're going to need from today until death?
Yeah, thinking about that backwards. We're living longer.
Right.
Technology is advancing, medicine's advancing, but some of it also is not that great, right? The quality of life in those later years are actually sometimes getting worse for people. Like that statistically is also increasing. So you're living longer, but your quality of life may not be as great. And so now you have to account for, additional assisted living costs potentially, or any sort of healthcare costs that may be associated with living to 90, 95, 100 years old. For some clients, we'll project that out. We'll say, hey, we're going to assume you're living to 95. That's our baseline. Baseline is 95 years old. And they're like, whoa. Yeah. And they're like, whoa. My parents died when they were 80, 75. Let's rein that in. Or we'll have other people say, hey, I love that number. My mom is still alive and she's 100. Okay, we're on the right track. So we'll start there and say, typical someone who wants to retire at age 65. We expect you to live to age 95. That's a 30-year retirement.
That's a long time.
That is a long time. So for projecting for that it's hard. It's not an easy thing because you think about inflation, right? We've been talking about inflation in the markets and the economy for the last 5 years. We have no idea what inflation is going to look like over the course of 30 years. We don't know what it look like in 6 months, right? So we have to be very conservative with all of our assumptions because at the end of the day, that's all we can do is make assumptions. We don't know what's going to happen. So for us, we like to be intentional about making conservative assumptions, and we're reviewing those assumptions with our clients periodically. It could be annually, it could be quarterly. If they have major changes coming up, we can make it monthly. And we're saying, this is what we're projecting out when you retire. This is what we're projecting out, between now and retirement. And this is how we think you're going to get there. If you tell me, technology and planning has got to a point to where there are so many different levers we can pull, so many different scenarios that we can explore that a client can be like, I want to be able to spend, throwing numbers out there, I want to be able to spend $150,000 a year right when I retire because I want to devote $50,000 to traveling because I know I'm not getting any younger after retirement, right? My first 5 years post-retirement, I want to spend that on the move as much as possible. And then maybe when I turn 70 or 75, we can turn that 150,000 to 100,000 because Father Time's going to eat up at me. I'm going to be slowing down. I'm not going to be traveling as much. Might be more at the house more, right? And so we can plan that out. We can say, okay, we'll cut your spending by 20%. We'll cut it again by another 20%. Mm-hmm. Or then maybe we'll add on long-term care planning that we need to figure out to account for how you get when you're potentially 80, 85, 90 years old. And you may need extra care at that point. So we're able to plan all that out, but ultimately we're putting together a list of assumptions that we work with based on having that communication with the client. And we say, hey, this is what you'll need to save to get to that point for you to spend X amount. And then we'll talk through if you're on track or if you're not on track. And then we figure out how to get you on track based on the numbers that we lay out.
When should people start planning for retirement? When should they come in and say, hey, I want to start planning for retirement?
Yesterday. No, I think as soon as you know that you're like, I don't want to be doing this forever. And don't get me wrong, people, young whippersnappers, me even myself, I'm like, oh, I'm a financial advisor. I'm not lifting heavy things. I'm not doing machinery work. I'm not doing construction. I can sit across from a table and talk to people until I'm blue in the face, 75 years old. That sounds great when you're when you're in the middle of it, when you're younger potentially. But at some point, your mind is probably going to change. And you want to be prepared for that. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket to say, oh, I can be doing this forever and time is no limit and I'm gonna die doing this. For me, I would never advise anyone to be doing that. So as soon as you come to that realization of, hey, I probably won't be doing this forever, and I probably won't be making this good of money forever. Mm-hmm. How do I make sure I plan to subsidize this once I decide to stop or once I decide to slow down? And so I think we talked about the compounding interest aspect of it already. As soon as you come to terms with that, you start saving incrementally. You start putting the money away incrementally. And as you start to make more money, you start to put more away, right? And over time, you let markets and returns and compounding interest do the heavy lifting for you. And next thing you know, you turn 65, you turn 70 if it's longer, if it's 50, and you said, this actually sucks and I don't want to do this another day. And you then say, this is why I started saving 25 years ago for this very moment.
Yes.
And so you don't need to talk to an advisor to do that. You don't need to reach out to a financial planner to do that. You take the onus on yourself. There's so many ways to invest these days. You Google investing and you're going to get 18 different options, right? Do your research, obviously, but don't feel like there's a fear of, oh, I'm going to have to pay an advisor for him to tell me that I need to start investing. No, start with your own research. Mm-hmm. And then if you feel like, this isn't adequate enough, then reach out to somebody, especially if you're younger and you're like, I just want to start off with something little, right? There's no dollar that's too small to start saving and investing for your retirement or any goal.
So as we get ready to wrap up, I have a couple more questions for you. For my community, for the people that are listening, what is one tangible thing they can start doing today, as soon as this podcast is over, they finish listening to the podcast, that they can start doing today that would help them with their financial freedom?
I think bare minimum is pay yourself first. Okay. Paying yourself first. We talked about it a little bit already. Treating your savings as another expense. Your rent, your mortgage, your groceries, your gas. That is another line item that you need to implement and think of it that way. If you're struggling to save, think about it as an expense. And then on top of that, automate it, right? Mm. If you're automating credit cards, you're automating your rent, you're automating your car note, automate your savings. You get paid on the 1st and the 15th. I want to save 10% of that income, have that automatically drawn out. And better yet, go into ADP, go into whatever, human payroll sources you have, and have that automatically sent to that savings account, to that investment account. Don't even let it hit your checking account so you don't even think about it. Have it automatically sent to that outside account. I strongly recommend people to not even, for me, if you bank with Chase and, they have your checking, your savings, you bank with Bank of America, have a completely different institution for your savings. And so you're not seeing
That's a great
that.
idea.
And so you know that that's completely separate. That's your retirement money. That's 30, 40, 50 years down the line. And that's out of sight, out of mind. And you've got your automated savings going. That's something that I recommend to start for anybody.
I know someone that, and they did this years ago, not when everything was so connected, but they have like their check-in and everything in one, let's say Bank of America. I'm just throwing that out there. And then their savings, they put it in a completely different institution that's out of the way. That would be an inconvenience for them to go there and withdraw money or whatever the case is. Of course, now, we have ATMs and Cash App and Venmo and all these other things.
Put your phone to your face, and you can get a withdrawal, right?
Exactly. It's so simple now, which is not a bad thing.
Right.
Not a bad thing. But when they, initially said that, I was like, that is such a great idea, because they didn't want to have to drive 20 minutes to go to the bank. It's not that serious for me to have to drive 30 minutes. I whatever it is, I don't need it that bad.
That additional friction, make things a little bit stickier in that situation. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
I agree. I think that's a great way to think about it. And obviously in today's day and age, that makes things a little bit different. But just as easy it is for you to withdraw money, it's as easy for you to deposit money as well.
Yes.
So think about it like that, in that glass half full of, I can withdraw this $50, or I can save $50 and get that invested today, right now.
Okay, so my final question for you, what is your intention in this space? What is your goal in this space you are working with? And we've talked about the F's throughout this conversation. You are working intimately with people, with their finances and their families. What is your intention in that space?
To be honest, I want to impact as many lives as possible. That's foundationally, that's what I believe in. That's how I grew up. And I do that through finances and family. I do that through two of the most important things that people have to deal with in their everyday lives, and understand that these items, these things will change their lives. And if I can be a positive impact that allows them to change it for the better, that allows them to make smarter, more educated decisions, I will do that. And that's what I want to do. So I believe financial literate and educated families change lives and change the world. And I think it starts in your community. I think it starts with your neighbor. I think it starts with the podcast. I think it starts with sending and sharing information that's educational, that's beneficial, and then we'll all be better for it ultimately.
Thank you so much for getting on this podcast and talking about finances, and, just understanding that it's more to it than just dollars and cents. It's a lot more to it than that. So thank you for educating me and my community about the 2 F's.
Thank you, Crystal.
Finances and family. Yes.
This is fantastic. This is fantastic. And I'm glad we were able to do this. And yes, everyone remember the 2 F's. And like I said, I'm always willing to have that conversation. I think it's important for people to have that conversation. And it's really what makes the change.
Absolutely. And to my community, thank you so much for tuning in and watching. You can get Isobo's podcast and all of my other podcasts on YouTube Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. And remember, you always have time to listen and learn on the go.